There's a commonality found in some dating sim releases. You take a thing, you put it in a dating sim and boom, there's a game. Pigeons, dinosaurs, office equipment, Halloween mascots, Colonel Sanders, the concept of death itself. This is one where you date melee weapons. But what's the difference between this game and the rest? This one had the decency to have an actual game in it. Those that know me know I hate irony sims, the games where the entire gag is, it's a dating sim, LOL, and hope that they can con you out of a few bucks with the promise that the game is actually something worth playing and a lot more than it is. On occasion it is, but most of the time it just isn't. Boyfriend Dungeon often finds its home in a lot of those clickbait lists right between I Love You Colonel Sanders and Raptor Boyfriend, where you can tell the original pitch meeting was 5 minutes long and it began and ended with, imagine if we had a dating sim with, like, this in it. That's not to say I don't play them on that basis alone. Sometimes, just sometimes, you end up playing a game where the concept is incredibly on the nose, but it ends up being something you end up loving. That's where I started out with Boyfriend Dungeon. It ended up on my Steam library one day and just sat there with the greyed out title like all my other uninstalled games I've never touched. Eventually it went from grey to white and I finally got around to playing it. So, how is it? As I mentioned before, the game isn't actually a raw dating sim because you're going to be spending more time in the roguelike portion crawling the dungeons. The story goes, you've just moved into a fancy new place for a few months. Welcome to Verona Beach. It's got designer stores, an art gallery, high-class restaurants, a cat cafe, and I can feel my Steam library becoming a lot more gentrified as I list off the options. You're in California, basically. As described by your cousin Jessie, dungeon crawling in this game is literally described as a fitness fad, and whoops, a Whole Foods just appeared in my Steam library. And that's where the actual weapon people come in. These people can transform into weapons. You, however, cannot, making you a wielder. So you can use these weapon people to clear the dungeons. Simple as. Also, weapon people are going missing apparently, but who needs to worry about that because you're going on a date! Incredible spoiler warnings follow. If the game interests you on visuals alone, I'm not here to stop you from getting it right here, right now, but I'm here to review one thing, and that's the romances. Isaac is the first weapon person you meet and acts as a tutorial weapon for the actual gameplay part of the game, and an exposition dump as for what you're fighting against. That being fears. You go into the dungeon and fight the physical manifestation of your fears. That's all you really need to know. He's an S-stock and his moveset is mostly stabbing and parrying. He's the only one that I'm aware of with a guard counter. As for the story, he's this eloquent rich boy with daddy issues. Seeing as he's the first weapon you actually wield, he's the only weapon person in the game that actually teaches you how to literally wield weapons. Which just brings into question the idea that you're using actual weapons to practice fighting this weapon person hybrid to practice wielding the weapon person hybrid when it'd be much less complicated to use a real weapon to clean the dungeons. Dungeons. Yeah, the roguelike portion of the games aren't dungeons, they're called dunges. And whoops, a gourmet burger place just spawned in my Steam library. But how's the actual romance? I mean, that's what I'm here to review after all. Well, it's pretty vanilla. But it's that flavour of vanilla that ended up becoming a lot more layered as time went on. See, it starts with just Isaac being rich and confronting severe daddy issues. Seriously, his dad just comes in and is cartoonishly villainous, talking about Isaac shitting himself in public, and I got to admit, done as it was, it actually got a laugh out of me. I do like Isaac. On the surface, he's rich, educated, kind, and handsome. A proper Hallmark Channel-style romance. And considering he's the very first character you can date, it makes a lot more sense. But as you start to romance others, you realise he's not like the other characters. There's no qualms in that he actually likes you, but we find out he's playing it cool for most of the game. By the time you reach the end of his arc, chances are you've been given the chance to straight up sleep with the other characters. But every time you're shown interest, he's politely declined. It turns out, Isaac's kinda trad. He's a religious, god-loving man who likes to play it cool, yet treats you like the princess, or prince, you are. So strangely, he went from a character I wasn't thinking too much about to a character I ended up enjoying purely for how different he ended up being to the others, which was impressive considering he's the first character you get. So you go from cynical because of the game that's surrounding him to wanting to put on some Kirk Franklin and do some missionary. And he's pretty good looking to boot, so he's got that going for him. I mean, seriously, the guy starts talking about motherhood. The second weapon that you meet is Sunder. And I'm just gonna... screw it. I'm putting it out there right now, I fucking hate Sunder. There's just nothing likeable about this creepy shirtless weirdo. He comes on to you so strongly and flirtatiously that it wouldn't land even if he didn't look like a Fabio from Temu. But it's because I know this vibe they're trying to go with. It's like they're trying to sell me something. The flirty man that you can't help but want because...
Oh no, he's hot!
God damn it, there's just nothing of substance here. That's his whole personality. I have abs and I'm troubled. I've seen it time and time again, and every time they do the whole "he can't love you" bit, it lands so flatly it wouldn't fit inside of an A cup. He can't possibly be attached to you, he loves everyone, you can't possibly win his heart. He also has a deep dark secret that he must hide from you, and, spoiler warning, he's a vampire. I was actually praying that it wouldn't be something as obvious as that. It was foreshadowed as far as the first ever meeting with him. I wished it was something more clever than that. It's not exactly subtle, but I was hoping they'd do a bait and switch, but no, he's just a straight up vampire and they don't do anything interesting with it. The worst part about Sunder is that he has a friend called Mandy, who's infinitely more attractive. Maybe it's because short-haired alternative girls are my kryptonite. Maybe it's because I really want to get down and dirty with a short-haired alternative girl. And, I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Short-haired alternative girls. I really want to marry a short-haired alternative girl. Tattooed woman save me. Where am I? Oh yeah, Sunder sucks. What's even worse, the absolute salt in the wound though, is that his romance ends with him breaking up with you. I actually had to search around to see if I got the bad ending. I didn't get the bad ending, it just ends like that regardless. Why? Why do that? I know I said I wanted a bait and switch, but not at the fucking climax. I just felt like anybody going down this route would have just wasted their time. I'm just there, standing at the gallows going, is this your first time playing a subversion of a dating sim? He's literally the cover star too. He's at the front of the main menu, he's the one on all the promo art, but he's just the dirt worst. And he looks like this! That's all he's good for, advertising. Come play a game, we have a guy. With abs. Ignore the terrible garbage surrounding him. All I'm saying is that you've already built the foundation of this shithouse, at least have the decency to put a roof on it. There's not one redeeming factor about Sunder. Except his weapon's actually pretty good. He's a Talwar, and is the only one who can cause the bleed debuff early enough for it to be useful, get it? Because he's a vampire. Damage over time usually does the heavy lifting at that point. So as a weapon, he is one of the better ones, but as a romance I'd rather watch Twilight. Blindfolded. In the comforting arms of a short-haired alternative girl. Oh. I'm too far gone. Valeria is the third weapon you meet in quick succession in the very first dungeon. But I know what you're thinking. A girl? In my boyfriend dungeon? By God, video games are gone woke! For illegal reasons, this is a joke. But yeah, if you want to play this game and are only into chicks, they've got them here. All 3 of them, as my bite don't count. And once more, she's probably one of the better romances in the game. After the first 2 were a little too enthusiastic to meet you, she's the first one who has a realistic reaction to waking up in a weird dungeon. Her arc is probably the first one that doesn't scream, "We're a subversion of a dating sim, aren't we special?" either. She's a bit secretive, a bit cautious, which is only natural because you found her in an unfamiliar setting. And it was fun to see how it all unfolded. Even if there is a part where you discover that Valeria was dating a brother and his sister at the same time in a polyamorous love triangle, and did I mention this game is based in California? Her weapon form is a dagger, which makes sense considering she has a history of being a graffiti artist and running away from the cops. It also helps that she's one of the best weapons in the game too. It's fast, it's efficient with mobs, and dodge roll and stuns enemies. It's an all-around useful weapon. She's an all-round A tier in the non-existent boyfriend dungeon tier list ranking I have in my head. Stop me if you've heard this before. The more you rank up a weapon, the more skills you unlock. You can reset these abilities at any time by using the gym in the overworld. You level up the normal way by completing dungeons. Oh, I'm sorry. Dungeons. With a separate love rank for your weapon, the more you use a singular weapon. The more you increase the love rank, the more buffs you get for your weapon, and further down the romance rabbit hole you go. This does encourage you to play around with all the weapons. But Christina, I hear you cry, what if I like a weapon a lot but don't want to romance them? Also, you're cool and I bet you smell like fruity cereal. First of all, thank you very much. Second of all, romance isn't actually required. I'm serious, you can just be friends with all these characters and turn them down and still increase their love rank. Which can be really confusing at times because a lot of them will be really into you and you'll have no way to actually turn them down until the game gives you the opportunity. Going back to Sunder for a minute, as much as I wish I wasn't, his ending scene is him breaking up with you, but he apparently still quote-unquote breaks up with you even if you're a friend. Are friendships here really that intense, or am I just crazy? Either way, boyfriends aren't required for the boyfriend dungeon. They can just be friends. Or girls. We sure do live in interesting times. This is 7. They are rectangular with long and straight edges and can be used for buildings and making furniture. And, sorry, wait a second. That's an emotionless plank of wood. I'm sorry. I've got my notes mixed up. Here we go. This is 7. With Sunder, it felt like they tried too hard, and with 7, it felt like they didn't try at all. They just said, hey, the kids like the K-pop idols, we should put one of them in our video game, what? The idol falling in love with the main character is a tried and true trope of otome, so his inclusion in a game like this was necessary if you want to hit all the trope checkmarks. I had to re-watch a lot of the stuff I recorded with him just to remember what happens, but long story short, he's a K-pop star with chronic depression. I'm not saying this to be mean or making a joke out of this whatsoever, that's his character arc. He suffers from chronic depression, which doesn't help because he doesn't think he's up to snuff with his other K-pop bandmates, and is constantly questioning his place doing what he does, but it's just so bland. And I have to tread carefully considering the character does mention they have depression by name. The game doesn't really do much in terms of risks like this, so when it does happen, and it's as heavy as this, I've got nothing to say. It doesn't help that he's just so utterly bland. He's the British food of romance choices as far as boyfriend dungeon's concerned, even down to the voice acting. This monotonous droning with no weight behind it. Even in the final love rank scene, this was my genuine reaction.
One where you stepped in and made
God, he's so
everything
bland.
better. I love you.
Oh my god, that's so bad. Out of all of that, that was the take they went with. The funny thing is, his weapon is a laser saber. This flashy lightning rod weapon to reflect the fact he's a K-pop star. The weapon itself is pretty good too, to be fair. Lightning arcs in heavy attacks that are good for chipping damage to enemies he can't physically reach. It's just a shame that it's a lot flashier than any personality. So if you do just want to watch the exploits of a K-pop star, then yeah, Steven is for you, but for Joe Schmo who doesn't know their BTS from their Beatles, what am I to say? There's nothing here. Interesting little fact for you. When this game was first announced, I and a lot of other people that were tired of the subversive dating sim shtick made a little fun at Boyfriend Dungeon, poked a little fun at it when it was first announced. The one character that I remember from all the way back then was Sawyer. When I first saw that face in my playthrough, I had a flashback to that time because of one particular reason. Under the likes list was the term social justice. So you were in a dungeon fighting things with a literal social justice warrior. And when I finally got to Sawyer, it all came flooding back. And not only that, the very first text message you get from Sawyer is coming out as non-binary and telling you what their pronouns are.
Fucking pronouns!
So you really want me to tell you what I think about Sawyer? I really liked Sawyer. In a game like Boyfriend Dungeon that constantly wears its premise on its sleeve, having a character just be a total doofus and a straight up goofball was incredibly refreshing rather than annoying, and I felt it could have very easily been annoying. Sawyer is a character that was a breath of fresh air, a palate cleanser that actually plays into the strengths of the game being what it is. No on-the-surface tropes, just a comedic-styled character that you actually grow to care for a little bit. You have all these texts from all these characters venting their frustrations and being deep and following the Otome tropes one by one, and there's good old Sawyer there just wanting to make a grilled cheese. So me. He's just a college kid anxious about exams and tests and learning how to cook, and it's probably easier to write in short bursts than chronic depression. But what about the whole social justice thing that I was talking about? It's not really there in the story either. I mean, there's a short scene where they imply that you're being exploited by going into the dungeon. I'm sorry, dunge. But it's more done so for comedy than a serious socio-political commentary. As a weapon, Sawyer is a glaive, which is the only one that doesn't make a whole lot of sense on the surface. Most characters have a weapon that reflect their personality or upbringing or heritage in some way. Isaac is an Estoc because he's a dignified gentleman and has a dignified style. Seven is a laser saber because of his flashy K-pop dancing. But Sawyer is a glaive because non-binary, I guess? Not quite a sword, not quite a spear. Can you physically throw a non-binary person a longer distance? Even with weapon choices later on that don't make sense on the surface, they usually have something going on that reflects their personality in terms of status effects or what they do. Sawyer is just a glaive. Chances are it's to do with the fact that Sawyer is the youngest of the romance options, but the way they describe turning into a weapon at a young age is so vague, I have no idea what they're going with. But forget about the story, what about the gameplay? I actually do like Sawyer as a weapon as well. If aimed right, the fact you can throw the glaive is very handy, making it the only consistent ranged weapon in the game in my opinion. Other ranged attacks are usually reduced to combos or not nearly as good, so having one that you can just do at a press of a button is quite handy. Not my favourite weapon in the game, but it wasn't one I didn't enjoy playing with or outright avoided. Then there are some duff weapons out there. I suppose I should actually start going into the dungeon part of the game a bit more. The actual dungeon parts, the parts that are actually a game, are pretty fun. If you're looking for an in-depth review of gameplay, then what you're seeing is pretty much it. Pick a weapon, go into the dungeon, smack the enemies around a little, and that's about it. You have your standard roguelike fare, secret areas, challenge rooms, but you also get these little rest areas that can either heal you up, or give you an opportunity to give gifts to your current weapon to give them a love rank boost. You better get used to them because they're repeated, but you do get unique dialogue for each character that visits them. You can get gifts by either buying them from the overworld or crafting them, because of course this game has a crafting mechanic, it's a Kickstarter title, it has to have a crafting mechanic! You can also craft clothing for your character, and clothes on the body are just for show, but the hats are where it's at. That's where you can get certain buffs, more healing items exposed more of the map. One even gives you double damage so long as you don't mind looking like this. I'm a pretty cowgirl. It can be fun if you're collector-brained, but if you're like me, chances are you'll find headwear you work well with and just rock it for the majority of the game. Jonah is a character you meet as the story progresses rather than in a dungeon, and he's so sad. You meet him and he's looking for a job and he's just so sad. He's a big guy with a big heart and he's just so sad. Seriously, the guy's just a big downer, which is an absolute crying shame because, you know, it's always big boy season in the Tasty household. I think even the devs knew this because he's the only character that has his shirt off when you're changing the stats around in the gym. The guy turns into an axe and he's the only romance option that's genuinely resentful of the fact he can turn into a weapon. It's an interesting premise that flounders on the ground because all he does is mope. I'm fine with the concept of it, but it's like they're playing the greatest hits when it comes to this. And all it does is make him look like a sad golden Labrador. Oh, he's sad, but you can cheer him up. He's so gentle and sensitive, but don't get him mad because he's a gentle giant. He's just a sighy, weepy character. I'm fine with sensitive characters. I'm all for sensitive people in general, but they just stick with the personality of him being a deflated balloon, and it's hard for me to attach myself when nothing seems to grow with him. As a weapon, he's awkward as well. He's an axe, but his swings are slow in the game, and in a game that's quite fast-paced, it can be a bit troublesome. I do feel a little bad for saying that he is too sensitive or too cryy, but he just doesn't grow. There's a bit where he gets a dog, but I'm assuming that's just to play on my heartstrings. I want to fall in love with Jonah. I don't want to be like, oh, look, it's a dog. Oh, that's great, isn't it? Dog. I love dogs. Yeah. He's just a human embodiment of a giant sigh. Which is a shame because he's pretty fit. The next romantic conquest is Pocket. He's a cat. And, wait a second, I just need to check something real quick. The next romantic date can't be a cow. Oh, that's why. Pocket isn't romanceable. He's another character's pet cat and can also turn into a weapon, the brass knuckles. Your love with the cat is just reflective in your standard love for a pet. So, whilst not romanceable, you do get an arc with Pocket, which is fun in its own way, but there's nothing much to go on here. I'm here to review romances. So how can you critique a romance arc when there isn't one? Well, I could still review him as a weapon. So how is he as a weapon? Well... Pocket is by far the best weapon in the game, and it's not even a contest. You can literally punch projectiles in the air. Damage doesn't even matter when you can just keep clawing and leaping your way to the end of each stage. I had to wonder if it was intentional. The fact that you have a cat is something you can rank up, but he's a non-romanceable character, so they made him ridiculously OP in game. This is another time the game plays into its strengths, this time on the gameplay side. I ended up loving Pocket purely because he ended up being my favourite weapon. There's parts in the game where you can invite your favourite weapon person out on dates, and Pocket is selectable in these lists. I actually instinctively stopped on him when I first discovered this, as if to say, well, yeah, I'm gonna pick Pocket, he kicks ass. And none of it is to do with his romance arc. Well, lack of romance arc. Can I call it a romance arc? Wait a minute, let me just check. Oh, god damn it, I forgot to turn it off. Rowan is an interesting case. There's a lot to talk about this character, but I wouldn't say there's anything significant about the romance arc to talk about beyond some extra gimmicks it comes with. Rowan is the only romance arc you actually have to figure out for yourself. The only one that comes with a little puzzle at the start. But after that, it's just like any other. It feels like they had extra ideas of what to do, but then never did it, so they did the one thing that they thought would work definitely, and then just left it. And all that came out of it was this androgynous twink witch. This is Rowan. And their talking bird, Crowley. As a romance arc, I'm not sure what to make of it. Rowan never clicked with me, and for a character who knows all about the occult and lives in a faraway spooky mansion, I'm surprised he was just so Blair. Nothing spectacular happens in this arc that doesn't happen in every other arc. It's literally reminding you that Rowan's a witch, you make out, that's about it. For a witch that spends a lot of time picking herbs, you forgot the spice. The character design isn't something to sniff at though. I actually like the character design, but it is out there and out of place, and there is a reason behind that. Remember what I said about there being a lot to talk about? At the start of Rowan's romance arc, he says this line. You want to know why he's suddenly talking about pigeons? Have you ever heard of a game called Hatoful Boyfriend? This is a lot more than just a singular reference to a video game. Rowan was straight up designed by the creator of Hatoful Boyfriend herself, which is probably why Rowan feels so out of place. You have characters who are blood-sucking vampires, yet for some reason fit into the general blandness of the game overall, and you have this witch character who's just kind of For a character so different and out there, I never really remembered Rowan. The only part I did was a kissing scene, where the game said the kiss tasted like sage, and all I thought was, is it supposed to be romantic that a kiss tastes like roast chicken? Well, to me it is. It doesn't help that the scythe weapon isn't very good either. It has a unique gravity well mechanic which is fun to mess around with, but the overall moveset is so weak it feels like you can't use it to its full potential. A unique weapon, a unique character, a very unique design. At the end, it's just not good enough. Leah is most likely the last character you'll encounter. By the time I unlocked her, I'd already reached max level with 1 or 2 weapons already. What's surprising is that for the last entry, she's a very low-stakes character. She's a former ice skater and aspiring fashion designer, and she's good. Nothing too exciting happens, but considering the alternatives, I appreciate the lack of forced drama. It stops her from being and a bit more interesting purely because they're not trying to jam a gimmick down my throat. Her weapon form is a hammer, which acts more so as a reference for her ice skating. Despite the fact that she's supposed to be athletic and thin, making her a hammer was actually a pretty ingenious choice. I have to hand it to the devs here, because it leans into the ice skating tandem. Remember when I said that she was an ice skater? See, it's relevant here. It's a lot better than Sawyer being a glaive because reasons. That, and you can do this with it. It's a slow weapon, so any attacks leave you more open to being hit, so you have to adjust your usual playstyle if you're like me and have clawed things at close range for the majority of the game. I suppose it's just nice to have a character where the only negative thing I can say about her is the fact that there could have been more. It's a bit similar to Isaac in that it's sometimes nice to be a little vanilla. True Madagascan vanilla that costs an arm and a leg. Leah is fun to be around. Her troubles are a bit more human. It's not something that I can call from a mile away, so at the end of the day, the only thing I have to say about Leah is she's decent. If there's 2 words I can say about Holmes, it's missed opportunities. She's the most unique character in the game, yet it feels like there's a but hanging on everything I have to say about her that's positive. She's actually the only dateable character who starts off as a boss fight. This means, however, that you can't wield her, which is a crying shame because she's a fucking electric whip! Her romance arc is a bit stilted because you can't level her up the usual ways, so every date you get with her just sort of happens. It ends with a scene where she comes to terms with what she wants to do in life, but plays you off as more of a friend, even if you do confess your love to her. Even if you confess your love to her, she rebukes it. But then, right afterwards, she's in your DMs talking about always and forever. Make up your damn mind, bitch! Her voice is notably off, too.
I am Dr. Holmes, legendary hacker, world-leading AI researcher, and one of the Forbes 5 Under 5.
It just doesn't fit. But remember Rowan. Remember how he was designed by the creator of Hatoful Boyfriend. Holmes also has a guest creator, Ikumi Nakamura. Some of you may have just shit yourself upon hearing this, but as a brief reminder, she's this girl, a concept artist for Bayonetta and The Evil Within, amongst an litany of other games. Chances are you've at least seen Ikumi Nakamura. This was the concept art. Compare that with what they went with. I'm just going to leave this here, just to let it sink in a little. The boss fights are actually super easy if you've leveled up enough, so yeah, beyond her being one of the better, more unique boss battles, it just feels like a wet sponge of a romance. There's so much here that could have made me love Holmes, and there is. Parts of a romance arc are genuinely enjoyable and you go along for the ride, but it just ends so abruptly it just ruins the entire experience. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one other character. Eric. Eric isn't romanceable, but he's a clerk in one of the shops. He plays a major role in the game and appears in different romance arcs, so it's a bit hard not to talk about him. But I'm also talking about him because, well, I want to talk about him and it's my video, shut up. Eric is your first canonical date, but it's strictly a storyline event. Despite his attractive looks, he slowly descends into madness, becoming a very creepy, rude, and almost criminal character. But it doesn't stop him from being the best character in this whole damn game. Oh my god, I love Eric. Every time he shows up, it's just to act like a massive dick, and it's got to the point where I was genuinely excited to see him, just to see what snippy comment he was going to make. I love this little diva. But what makes him so great isn't the fact he's a creepy weirdo incel stalker, but it's also how he's presented. These really awkward romance lines, the self-defeatism, the gaslighting, the prudishness, the need to be a total control freak. The man is Reddit incarnate. Slap a fedora on him. Any other girls watching this have seen or have sadly experienced their very own Eric. The nice guy. If you've seen any video from Moist Critical or seen a Reddit thread or anything like that, you've probably seen this exact archetype. They exist in real life, and the writers really did their homework. He's an absolute highlight of the entire game because of how effective he is at emulating this nice guy experience. So effective at emulating the nice guy experience that people actually got up in arms because they weren't warned about him because he was so real. There were articles about this being a controversy all over Eric. That's effective writing. Eric isn't a likable character, but I love his existence in the game. I know it feels like I'm taking the piss or being mean for the sake of being mean when I say the weirdo creepy stalker character is the best, but I mean that genuinely because the way they've written him is so real to the experience that some of us have had. And I felt a little bit sad that I couldn't fix him myself when I've got all these other walking cliches to fix. Where is my Eric arc? Let me fix Eric. Let me take him to therapy. God! So, where does that leave me? The game is called Boyfriend Dungeon, where the best boyfriends aren't boys, the best weapon person's a cat, and the hottest characters aren't even dateable. So, where does that leave us? In a pile of mediocrity. It has the occasional sprinkle of something there, but it's just a whole load of meh. I didn't finish Boyfriend Dungeon with a sour taste in my mouth, but that was mostly because it was held up by its gameplay and not at all by its romance. To rank it as one of the best dating sims is a massive stretch, considering that at its heart and soul, it's a dating sim parody through and through. And I don't feel like it's my fault for taking the game too seriously either, because the game takes itself seriously in some cases. I mean, there wouldn't be so much controversy over Eric if it wasn't supposed to be taken seriously a little bit. It still carries that we're so subversive stink throughout, and any characters I liked were characters that didn't have the template ready-made for them based on all the other dating sim archetypes, and were also characters I shouldn't have liked in the first place. So yeah, it's pretty much exactly what I was expecting in a way. It just hurts because there are some little instances of something there, but it's just not being unearthed. I feel if they actually just went straight for it, took this premise and did something a bit more serious, it could land, because I do see something, but it's a giant gimmick. Enjoy. And like all of these subversive dating sims, people seem more in love with the idea of it than they do with the actual game. But if you want a roguelike game that has romance options, just play fucking 80s. Power ranking! Number 9, Sunder. Take those fangs and suck a big bag of dick. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I got nothing, but luckily neither does he. 7, Jonah. So sad. Number 6, Rowan. At least they're looking pretty when casting that spell of being forgetful. Number 5, Holmes. The science behind this fumbled bag must be studied. Number 4, Leah. I'll have some ice with my vanilla. Number 3, Sawyer. Yes, I'm still as surprised as you are. Number 2, Isaac. May the Lord help you through your daddy issues. And number 1, Eric. Give me sorry, it's Valeria. My favourite romance in the game is Valeria. She's the only one with something substantial enough going on that I can't just hand-wave and call vanilla. I enjoyed her story, it was original, and she's one of the best weapons in the game.